Hello and welcome to Green Pass Gaming. I'm your host Phlapp, and today we've got a slightly different show from what we normally do, not the normal podcast. This one's been a little bit of a pet project that I've had rattling around in my head for a little while, and I thought I'd like to interview the person that actually inspired me to start doing YouTube videos and set up my own YouTube channel in the first place. And if it wasn't for this guy, I probably wouldn't be sat here doing this right now. So I'm incredibly grateful to him. He hosts his own podcast channel on YouTube. He does at least 3 shows a week. And if there's a newsworthy week, he does 5 shows. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce from Double Barrel Gaming, Mr. Boomstick XL himself. Hello.
Hey man, hey Phlapp, how's everything, brother? Thank you so much for having me. This is very interesting, and you know what? I got to tell you, I'm honored to be here because, listen. At the end of the day, I am just a regular guy who was fortunate enough to have a career that allowed me to retire early, and now I get a chance to talk about gaming and the fact that people and obviously just like I think the 3rd or 4th, maybe even the 5th time I've been interviewed is pretty humbling. I have to admit.
No, well, to be honest, I reached out to you and you were very, very welcoming from that very first DM that I sent you. And it meant a lot to me, to be honest. It's like, because when I first started thinking about getting into this sort of game, it's like, well, I don't know if I'm going to I don't know if I'm going to gel. I don't know what kind of people I'm going to meet. And to be honest, from day one, I've met the nicest people and the most welcoming people. And you're one of those. And to be honest, like I say, if it wasn't for yourself, I probably wouldn't be sat here.
That's very kind of you to say. Thank you.
Well, the podcast that you do, there's lots out there, as you know. When you start podcasting, you probably don't quite realize how many there are out there until you're actually part of it. But I've always found yours probably the most accessible, to be honest. I think it's because of your style of delivery as a host, but also the panel that you have on and the topics. It's not overbearing. Some of the other ones can be a little bit overbearing, if I'm honest. But I don't know, you just feel involved as part of the community when we listen to your shows. And I'm guessing there's not many people that are watching this that aren't aware of your work, but you're very open and honest, and you do give snippets away of information about your sort of gaming history or gaming career, shall we say? And it's always sort of inspired me to try and find out more. So that's kind of why I thought I'd do an interview and sort of consolidate all of that information into one interview.
Well, listen, the way I do my shows, one of the most important things for me, again, this is not a dig on anyone's style. This is just the way I do it, is I was very fortunate enough to be allotted the opportunity to be a guest on Crossfire, which is Mooch's show on Friday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern. And I reached out to him as a fan, not as someone who actually aspired to be a podcaster. I thought about it, and my brother Neo Mental and a good friend of mine, Jay Zayas, who you always see in the chat, have always been pushing me, saying that, listen, you have a lot to say. I think you people would be interested to know what you're thinking. And I always kind of maybe not. I don't know. I was originally going to do a blog. I wanted to originally get into journalism and gaming as my second career. And I did not like the way journalistic integrity had taken a turn. So I decided that my voice, whether it was going to be heard by just my brother and my friend or a bunch of people, was more important. And that's how I came into the decision to attempt to get onto a show. And that's what I did with Mooch. I reached out to him through a DM and I said, hey, listen, are you interested in bringing in community members to be guests on the show? Now, for me, I'm going to be honest with you, and I'll be honest when anyone's going to listen to this. This was a complete bucket list shot in the dark. Everyone has one. Everyone has a bucket list of things that they want to do in their life, and being on one show was one of them. And I was on the show, and I did my spiel, and you know what? Mooch thanked me, and I thought that was it. And I said, you know what? That's the check mark. Here we go. Done deal. I got it done. And then the next week, he asked me back. And in the 3rd week, he asked me back. And then on the 4th week, he said something interesting. I don't think I've actually shared this with anyone. He said, boom, listen, in a private message, the community loves you. They love your sensibility. They love your positivity. They love how transparent you are about your gaming history, and the fact that you support multiple consoles, and that you don't like the console war shenanigans. Would you like to be a panel member? And I was floored. I mean, like, talking about it, I'm right here now. I'm getting goosebumps, because that was an opportunity that I never thought was ever going to be presented. And I stayed on Crossfire for 2 whole years.
Oh, wow.
And after about maybe 14 months of doing that show, I had said, I'm going to start my own show. And that's where Breakfast with Boom was born. As a matter of fact, that particular podcast was born by me downstairs doing the laundry. I'm like thinking of names for the show. Yeah, believe it or not. I was downstairs folding, and Breakfast with Boom, and I wrote it down, and I started saying it. And I said, Breakfast with Boom, Breakfast with Boom. That actually sounds pretty cool. And every name that I've come up with has been so unusual. We'll get into that. I'll tell you some of the funny stories that I don't think I've ever told anybody. It's pretty interesting.
No, that would be good to hear. And to be honest, you brought up the point about positivity. I think that's one of the things that is kind of integral to your show, to be honest, is the positivity. And like you say, not bashing one side or the other. It's about gaming at the end of the day. And lots of people seem to struggle that you can have a preference and not actually bash the other side.
Yes, it's a great point.
Lots of people struggle with that. Perhaps we come back to your YouTube channel a bit later on, actually, because I kind of tried to thought we might try and do this chronologically if we can.
Sure.
So for me personally, back in 1985, I mean, I'll never forget this day. My brother walked through the door. He's 11 years older than me. And after work, he walked through the door and he had a box under his arm. So this was, 1985 this was, so I'd have been 9, so I'm 44 now. And he put the box down, opened it up, and inside was a Sinclair ZX Spectrum.
Wow.
So I'm guessing they were not sold in the States. Are you
No, I don't think so. I think that was Europe. That was wow. That's awesome.
It's very much a UK thing, and anyone over a certain age in the UK will absolutely know what that is. Yes, it was kind of the first cheap home computer that anyone could buy, and it played games, and you had to load them from a separate tape deck that wasn't sold with it, and you kind of plugged it into a modem. And I mean, the graphics were awful. I mean, I was playing games like Outrun and things like that, and it would barely run, but you could do a little bit of programming on it, basic programming. But that was that day that got me into gaming. That was it. I mean, I kind of commandeered that. After about a month, I think everyone sort of thought that computer was mine, to be honest. I think my brother relented and thought, right, okay. But you're very open and honest about where you kind of started in your gaming career, as it were. You started a little bit before me, so tell us about how all of that came about and what got you into gaming.
Well, for me, gaming started in 1978, 77 or 78, because I'm obviously going to be 50 in September, so I'm a little long in the tooth. And for me, very similar to your story, my dad, blue collar guy, construction worker, we were, I would say, an under average, family when it came to financials. And he comes through the door and he is holding something under his arm. Now, obviously in 78, video gaming was very limited. Yeah. And of course, you watch TV and you see commercials and he was holding the Atari 2600. And he had a couple of games with him, and he sat it down. He said, "Hey guys, listen, just want to give you guys something. You guys have been real good all year. We're doing good in school, doing our chores, doing what we're supposed to do." And I'll never forget, man, that the truth of the matter, and my dad never told me this. He never actually told me this. But in my heart of hearts, my parents were super young. My parents were only... my parents were under 20 years older than I was at any given point. They started their family very young. Mm-hmm. And we did so many really cool things with them growing up. And I think that at the same time as it was fun for us, it was fun for them. Okay. So even though my father never personally admitted it, I think that him bringing home the console, the Atari 2600, was not only for us, but secretly, because he's a big macho man, my dad, it was for him, because the first game he played with me was combat, and one of his favorite things was, of course, war movies. So the fact that we were driving tanks around and shooting each other and going around corners, it was incredible. Here's a little bit of a tidbit that a lot of people didn't know. Obviously, we used to. The graphics were, I don't even think they were color, to be honest. I think they were just black and white. And if you shut the lights off and you turn the TV a certain way, you can get the ghosts to be color like they were in the arcade. It was pretty crazy. Yeah, that's my first foray into gaming was the Atari 2600. And in truth, and I've said the story before, and I'll tell it to you. Since then, I know this sounds crazy, but I have owned every gaming console here in the States to present. There has not been a console that I missed that released here in this country.
Wow, well, we can talk about that. And I was wondering about that kind of thing actually with consoles. So that'd be quite good to talk about that. So what was the next logical step? What happened after the Atari?
If I recall correctly, I believe the right after that was the Atari 5200. Which was a much different system. It had, because the Atari had the one stick and the one button. That's what the Atari 2600 was. The 52
one orange button.
Yeah, the one orange button. The 5200 was more like it had a keypad with a little controller. It was a little bit of a nubby controller, and it had buttons for, I believe it was 2 red buttons on each side. So it was a little bit of a different controller, giving you more access. And I believe the 7800 was right after that. Now, my first big console was the NES, which in 1985, when I turned 15 years old, and my mom and dad said, "What do you want for your birthday?" And I went to Play World, which it doesn't exist anymore, hasn't existed in, oh my God, 30 years, 30 plus years, and I bought the NES that came with Mario and Duck Hunt.
Wow. So was Mario your first sort of major title that you kind of got into, or?
I'm trying to think,
because you don't talk about Nintendo much on your shows. So is Nintendo part of your life?
You know what it is? I am a diehard Nintendo kid. Like, I don't really see the issue with running a show. Here's a perfect example. Breakfast with Boom this past Friday. One of the major topics was the fact that an older Wii Zelda game is going to be brought, according to a leak, going to be brought to, of course, the Switch, which I have 60 games for. I love the Switch. Wow. I play it all the time. I love all their first party stuff. And that particular video really did not do well regarding views. And to be honest with you, it has a lot to do with the subject matter. Nintendo, unfortunately, is a great console. It's a console that most gamers will admit that is their second console, even potentially their third console. But for some reason, it's not a subject matter that people really want to talk about. And so I don't talk about it because I'm a numbers guy, but I try to keep the topics very relevant to what the community wants to hear and discuss. And unfortunately, Nintendo is just, as great as it is, it's just not a big subject matter of conversation, especially in the podcast game.
No, that's true. And, they don't tend to get involved quite like Sony and Microsoft do in the battle. They just do their own thing, don't they? Which is
sure
absolutely fine. But you mentioned actually on one of your recent podcasts about arcades, and that actually triggered in my mind, because I posted a tweet the other day. My most favorite arcade game was Gauntlet. I used to love the 4-player version.
That was a great one, especially with your friends. That was awesome.
Yeah, to be honest, I guess it was the first sort of 4-player game I'd ever played like that, and I absolutely loved that game. So what games did you carry with you for your gaming career from the arcade? Because there was always that, no matter what console or what sort of machine you bought home, it was always that comparison about, is it like the arcade graphically and things? And
for me, I think the one of my favorite genres that unfortunately took a dip but recently came back in a big way was the fighting game genre. Okay. And for me, the all-time, literally the number one game for me that I would go through hell or high water to play was Killer Instinct.
Okay.
And of course, that was on the that was way back in the days. I'll never forget. I mean, again, we can all harken back to the first time we saw Street Fighter 2. We're like, oh my God, Street Fighter 2, or SNK's World Heroes is another one that my brother and I used to play. I mean, the Mortal Kombat, the first time we saw the blood, it just Virtual Fighter. Remember seeing Virtual Fighter for the first time, those 3D characters? You were like, my God, I can't believe 3D. And now we look at it now and our eyes bleed.
I was a big Sega fan to the extent that it kind of excluded Nintendo from my life for a bit. It wasn't till I had nephews that sort of Nintendo came into my life, really. I mean, I always knew it was there, but it was always the other side of the fence. And we could never really afford multiple consoles. And I stuck with the Sega route. And the one that kind of dragged me in, I remember I was at school. It was at lunchtime one time, and it was over a friend's house, and they had their Mega Drive. I think it's Genesis in the States they called it. I don't know why they was changing name. Mickey's Castle of Illusion, and that's
so good on that.
Blew me away. Yes. It blew me away.
All hand drawn art, man. Just wow.
It was enough for me to actually go the next day and buy that console. And I missed out on the Master System, but I was a Sega fan from then on. So when things like Virtua Fighter came to the Saturn and things like that, it was a real moment that, oh wow, you've almost got the arcade in your living room. And then from there, I moved on to the Dreamcast.
My favorite console of all time, literally my favorite console.
Oh, I'm pleased you said that. I love that console. It was it obviously came with the modem and things like that. Crazy Taxi, Ready to Rumble, all of those games. I just love that console. I've got it under my TV actually as we speak.
It's funny you should talk about the Dreamcast. I don't know who I had a discussion on Twitter. And we were and they were going back and forth as someone had asked a question, what are your top 3 consoles? And what that was one of the questions I answered. And the second one was what are your opinion was for the greatest launch of all time? I got to tell you, I think that even to this day, without question, the Dreamcast launch, and it launched here in the States 9/9/99 is when it launched. I'll never forget that because I drove through a monsoon. Like, my brother worked at Funkoland, which is now GameStop here in the States. And I remember it was raining so torrential, they closed the highways. And I figured out a way to take the local streets from the Bronx all the way up to Yonkers, New York, through the side. I think it took me about 2 hours to finally get there in a rain monsoon, but through the side streets, because I wasn't missing this launch. But what was insane is that actually wasn't my first time with the Dreamcast. I imported it a year earlier. Oh, yeah, dude. I imported everything up until the PlayStation 3. I imported everything.
So what games did you have on the import then? What did that come with?
Oh my God. Okay. The import Dreamcast came with, and get ready, sit back and strap in, because this is what this thing cost. Okay. Now, I was a big, and you ever make a move on something that you look back 15, 20, 30 years later and you just want to punch yourself in the face? Well, that's the story I'm going to tell you.
Okay.
I have been growing up as my favorite toy of all time. Even until I was an adult, has been G.I. Joe. It has been my favorite, toy of all time. Comic, cartoon, whatever. And I had about 400 to 500 of the figures. But what's why I want to punch myself in the face is because I had about 380 of them mint on card. And we're talking stuff going all the way back to the 80s, all the way up to present. And towards the end of its run, there were these aliens that came out that didn't sell very well. They're worth like $400 or $500 per figure. I had triples and quadruples of every one of them.
Oh, wow.
And I'd be pretty rich right now if I had all these figures. And what I wind up doing is the Dreamcast package from this import shop that was online was 4 games, an extra controller, the console, and one of the memory cards, right?
Yep. The VMs.
$1,500.
Wow.
So yeah, $1,500 is what this thing cost.
Wow.
And back then I had just met my wife was my girlfriend at the time, and I was new to the force. I wasn't making a lot of money, so I was like, well, what can I do to get this system? And I took every one of those GI Joes. I got a comic shop and I sold them for $1,500 exactly. Now I'm telling you right now, the collection was probably worth 3 times that.
Yeah.
And
wow.
I got rid of it, and I look back and I'm like, you idiot. You know what I'm saying? But I got my console, and what it came with was interesting. First of all, there was a Japanese game that came completely in Japanese. It was like a murder mystery kind of a thing.
Okay.
And it was unplayable. It was literally unplayable. It just you looked at some screen. I couldn't even figure out how to start the game. That's how much it just was. It was a complete. It was a wash. But it came with Pen Triathlon, which was it was like a racer with penguins.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not aware of that game.
Yes, I actually quite enjoyed it. Believe it or not, I actually quite enjoyed that game. Godzilla, which is one of my favorite monster characters, and it came with Virtual Fighter. I think it was 3 at the time.
Yes,
and those are the 3 games that I wound up getting with the console. And when I brought that console home, I was completely blown away. I was like, wow, Sega has done it. This is because I was a big fan of the Sega Saturn. I loved the Saturn.
Me too. Yeah.
And when the Dreamcast came out, I'm like, okay, here we go. They're doing it. They're going to give the PlayStation a run for their money. And we know what happened, but one of my favorite games and one of the favorite stories that I have with that said game was December 24th of that year, the import year. I believe it was 98, if I'm not mistaken. Sonic Adventure released, and I had imported it. I spent, I think, $40 to get it overnight shipped. Wow. It was ridiculous. Back then, the import prices they were so absurd. And I got a copy for me and a copy for one of my best friends. That's actually been on my show, Jay the Destroyer. We grew up together, and it came on Christmas Eve. I'll never forget. I stayed up until Christmas morning playing that game, just completely amazed.
It's an awesome system, and to be honest, you alluded to it earlier, actually. That because I love the Saturn as well. I loved Sega Rally, Daytona, all of those sort of things. And when the PlayStation came along, it's like, who's this new kid on the block? I didn't want it to be, because Nintendo was Sega's competition. I didn't want there to be someone else at the table. And I remember comparing. Literally, we compared. I had friends, because all my friends had PlayStation, and I was kind of staunch Sega. Because of the history with the Genesis and the Mega Drive, and so I remember doing a direct comparison side by side with Resident Evil, and I just had to capitulate that the PlayStation version was better, and I kind of knew at that point that actually I think Sony are going to be a force to be reckoned with. And like you say, when the Dreamcast came along, it's like, oh, perhaps they can sort of claim back the crown. And then PlayStation 2, the blue LED. I think the blue LED sold a lot of those units.
Yeah, sure.
And obviously the DVD drive. So I guess my leanings are always towards Xbox. Although I have owned every single PlayStation all the way up until PlayStation 4. Believe it or not, I don't own a PlayStation 4, and there is a reason for that. But so my leanings have always been towards sort of Xbox, because in my mind they're always the sort of Sega replacement, as it were.
I agree.
So why for you do you tend to lean to Xbox and not PlayStation so much?
Okay, so here's the thing. I have been a supporter of. I've owned every Sega console you could possibly imagine. I've owned every console you could possibly imagine. I have figured out a way. Even if I had to sell water on the side of the road to get it, I figured it out. With the PlayStation versus Xbox, here the thing is this. What I found incredible about the Xbox when it launched in 2001. Besides, because everyone just says, well, Halo Combat Evolved is what made me an Xbox gamer. As great as that game is, and it is legendary, and it is the grandfather, if you will, of first-person shooting games on a console, there were so many unsung heroes for the Xbox that just PlayStation didn't have. I mean, again, you know, obviously, if you look back to some of the stuff that came out, do you remember Splinter Cell being an exclusive?
No, I don't.
Yes, it was an exclusive. It was an exclusive. It wasn't exclusive for years. I think it was an exclusive. It might have been like 6 months.
But even that's a big deal.
I'll never forget when I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I mean, Crimson Skies is still one of my favorite games on that console. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if you look back to Mech Assault, I mean, it's just there are countless other games that people forget about because it's all about Halo, and they were experiences that were only found on, of course, the Xbox brand. And at the time, believe it or not, they actually looked better. Now, granted, the Duke controller was pretty beefy, man. I mean, that was you needed like 9 hands to kind of properly control that. But they obviously eventually released the S. But how I've done it over the course of my gaming career, if that's what you want to call it, is I just always enjoyed Xbox because of the experiences that didn't seem like they were very samey, like you would find on Nintendo and Sony. And what I started to realize is that, yes, it is okay, because I don't like painting myself into a corner. And I think that's one of the biggest taboos with this particular community that you and I are in.
Yeah.
It seems as if you must pick one console, or you are either a sellout, or you are an apologist, or you are a neutral, which I can't stand either of those terms. But a neutral, I think, aggravates me the most, because I'm very open and clear that the Xbox brand is where I lay my head at night. So that particular brand, I love everything about Xbox for many reasons, more than just games. I like my achievements. I like my friends list. I like the accessibility. But you know what I like more than that? I like the fact that if you write to an executive, and it's a complex question, there's a good chance that Phil may answer you, Aaron may answer you, Matt Booty may retweet something you put out there. You know what I'm saying? Major Nelson might be on your show like he was on mine. You don't see that with Nintendo, and you certainly don't see that with Sony.
No, and you're right. And I think, obviously with the Xbox Series X launch, that engagement with the community for Microsoft, I think is really important. I think they're doing a really good job, actually, engaging with the community. And I was going to come on to the Major Nelson interview a little bit later on, actually. Sure. So you're stranded on a desert island, and you can pick one console and a game for that console to play for the rest of your life. What would it be?
Well, it's going to be the Xbox. It's going to be the Xbox, whether that's be the Series X, the Xbox One. If I had to play, I have to play one game for the rest of my life, man. That's you need something that's got some content to it. And I suppose the best game that you could potentially pick is something that has an open world to it, with lots of things to do that you could run through. You know what? I'm going to pick a game that isn't out yet. That I played on the Xbox 360. I'm constantly talking about this game, and of course, obviously, I think it's about maybe 2 weeks, we're going to be playing the new version of it. Kingdoms of Amalur is a game that I could restart and play from the beginning forever, because it's just I think that it is the best game that's not called Fable, simply because of its combat. Its combat when it comes to melee versus magic and in working with both in tandem is a system that I don't think has been reproduced by anyone as good as them.
That's interesting because the game that really got me into open world games was Oblivion, Elder Scrolls 4.
Oh, wow, that's a great one. Yeah.
Absolutely love that game. And there's certain, this is going to sound strange, but there's certain elements of me that were disappointed by Skyrim to a certain bit, because I don't know if you ever had this in Oblivion or Skyrim, or actually any of the Elder Scrolls games, but they do this thing where they play this sort of random music track over the background, and sometimes it all just clicks together. You know, you'll just walk over the crest of a mountain and the music's playing and the sunset, and you think, my God, they've programmed this moment just for me, and it's just complete random. But that was the game I think I would probably take on a Desert Island Disc.
You know, and that you wouldn't be wrong for that. That's a fantastic pick. I remember, man. I mean, look, I'll be honest with you. I don't remember playing Morrowind on the Xbox regular one.
I've never played that.
Because that was obviously where it started. But I can tell you, when Oblivion came out, my God, first of all, that game is notorious for a lot of reasons. First of all, the size and scope was something I don't think we've ever seen on console. The collector's edition was one of the first big like collector's editions, and I still have it, gold coin and map and everything, dude. I still have it in pristine condition. But of course, that brings up the dreaded horse armor. You remember the DLC?
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
Everyone went crazy for. And it is that's a strong pick. I you know, it's funny. I like how we both using the Fable type architect for a game that we would bring with us, because that's a big game. That is a really big game.
It's the sort of game that I can escape into, and like I say, it's those little magical moments that just all come together, just through pure chance and random. It just, you know, it really sits well with me. I've had lots of great moments in Tamriel, and I just love that game to bits.
Yeah, that's a strong pick. Like I said, I don't know if you've ever played Kingdoms of Amalur. It's backwards compatible. I just started it the other day again, and then of course everything came out, and I'm like, oh God damn it, I got to put this game down because there's all these new games coming out. But Re-Reckoning is only $40, and I'm telling you, my God, what they have done with this game! It looks next gen, like it is absolutely incredible. Yeah.
I'll check that out. No, I've not played that, so I'll definitely check that out.
If you enjoy Oblivion, you're going to love this game.
Oh, cool. You know what? I love it when people sort of give you recommendations like that, because that's a big thing, isn't it? Because, you know, I remember someone sort of gifting. It feels like someone gifted me Oblivion once, because they said, you know, you need to check out this game, and I was quite, you know, resistant. And then when I got over that sort of initial opening scene, 20 minutes, half an hour, it's like, oh my God. And it just felt like I'd been gifted a new world. It was awesome. So yeah, I really appreciate that. Let's move on to your YouTube channel. I know that's a bit of a leap, but obviously, you know, as your background, that's kind of the basis for your YouTube channel. So you've told us about how you kind of got into it, but how did you kind of get established? I mean, how did you put your roots down? How did you know? Because I mean, you mentioned Breakfast with Boom. Did you just do one show a week at the beginning? I mean, how did you kind of ramp it up to what it is today?
Okay, so this is actually pretty interesting. Again, you're asking questions that not a lot of people ask, so good on you, because people are going to get to listen to this and be like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. First of all, I want to say this before I even answer the question. I'm an old dog, and I don't mean that to be disrespectful to myself. Folks, I'm going to be 50 years old, and what I am learning and what I am doing is what the kids are doing these days. So if you are someone who, you see, I always had a voice in here that needed to pop out, talk about video games. And I would talk about video games with anyone that would listen. And it came a point where when I started, because I didn't know what YouTube really was. Like, I know the kids were watching YouTube, watching videos, but I didn't know that there were all of these amazing content creators. And how I found out about that is my utter distaste for the gaming industry. What wound up happening is, obviously in 2013, Xbox, they bumbled the, of course, launch of the series, the Xbox One X. And at that point, before that E3, remember, they were the darling of the industry, very similar to where Sony is right now, right? Like, Sony can't go wrong. And Microsoft with the 360 was in that position. And then something shifted. The ideology at Microsoft shifted from, making games and being there for the fans to TV, and sports. And they had people in place that shouldn't have been in those high positions, saying things that they shouldn't have said, and they basically muddied the water. And the industry, which again, I used to be that guy that had that listened 5 days a week to every mainstream media podcast, Game Informer, Giant Bomb on Tuesday, the one on Friday, the Gamer Tag Radio, which I still listen to. I like those guys over there, Danny Paris. Those guys are great. I said IGN. I used to be that guy that helped them keep the lights on and paid $30 a year for PC games I didn't even play because I didn't have a PC to play them. You know what I'm saying? I was that guy, and I got disenchanted with the way that they were doing their reporting. And I actually made mention of that how the integrity behind the journalists of today, again, this is just my opinion, and I'm not taking a jab at anybody, but the integrity has gone out the window. When I was growing up, I was reading EGM. I was reading Gamers Republic, Die Hard Gamer, Video Games Review. I was importing magazines from Japan, from Europe. I used to spend, the magazine was eight pounds there. I was paying $16 here in the States for that magazine.
Wow.
But I was in, there was no internet back then. So this was all brand new news every time you cracked open a magazine. And the way that the industry used to write back then was one of pride and one of excitement and just happy to be talking about video games. Whereas now it's kind of gone out the window. So that disenchantment kind of funneled me to start my own channel. And in 2017, November 3rd, 2017, to be exact, I decided to do my first Welcome to Double Barrel Gaming video. And I got to tell you this right now. Not only is it the worst video I've ever done, it's so bad. The audio is off. The lighting is off. It's so bad, it doesn't even have a thumbnail because I didn't even know what the hell a thumbnail was. Okay,
Wow.
I didn't even know what that was. It has a picture of Wolfenstein, the one at the time of that came out that year, as the thumbnail with no wording or nothing. And still, Welcome to Double Barrel Gaming. And you know something? It's still up. It's up because from where I was to where I am now are just so leaps and bounds different. And it's a perspective. When I doubt myself, because as a host, and you know this because you host your own show.
Yep.
You do a show, and you walk away from it unimpressed, and you'll be like, you know what, that show sucked. And I've had that in the last couple of weeks, a couple of times where it's done well with views, and my co-hosts were like, nah, boom, that was a great show. And in my mind, I'm like, that was just complete garbage. And, I hold myself to a very high pedestal. But getting back to what got me into it was my disenchantment. And I did my video. And I think that mostly, like, for instance, you're relatively new. And I think that you're doing what I wish I would have done. And you started a podcast immediately, starting your YouTube career, whereas I did like what a lot of people do. We do videos and we talk about other, we talk about games, but we talk about other stuff that is going on in the industry. We talk about some journalists that are being complete D-bags. And that's what I did for the first 6 months and 7 months. And when I started realizing, and again, I hearken back to people that I know that are I consider to be peers, like for instance, Dealer Gaming, Colt Eastwood, which I met in person, Rand Althor 19. There are several YouTubers that will do a video, and they do 3 or 4 videos a week. They get 25,000, 50,000 hits per video. They put a tremendous amount of work into it, and that works for them. See, for me personally, being behind the microphone live is a pressure. And again, this because you're a host, that I enjoy. I enjoy the pressure of having to put on a show and make it be professional. Like write the material, get the teleprompter up and running, get the guests, get the topics, hot topics, breaking news, and the pressure of having to do all of that live on the air without being able to make a mistake is something that I enjoy. Now maybe that's because of my prior career of running to where a gun run is as opposed to running away from it. I like that excitement, and that is what pushed me to actually start doing live content, because the taped content, the videos was great. It was fun. I was getting exposure. People were enjoying the voice. But then I said, I kind of want to interact with the people. I want to interact with the community. I want a friendship, not just to be a guy on the other side that puts out a video. I want to talk to the people. And here we are. I just crossed 5,000 subs last week.
Well done. Congratulations for that.
Thank you. And that's a big deal. That's a big deal for a very small channel. And I've had relatively pretty good success. Listen, I take nothing for granted. I mean, the one thing I'll say about YouTube is if you're not consistent, you are an afterthought. And you owe it to your fan base. And I can't, and I gotta be honest with you, I still get embarrassed to say that I have a fan base because I'm nobody. But the fact that I have 5,000 people that took the time to sub my channel as a professional, you owe it to them to make sure that your content is right. And you should not be told by your fans that your content isn't right, because if you are, you're doing something wrong.
Absolutely agree. And to be honest, there's, like you say, there's lots of big, RDX, Colt Eastwood, they've got huge followings. I think Colt's over 100,000 subs.
Sure. And Zolker is getting up there. D-Batch, the Grounded Gamer, Tim Dog. I mean, they have some panel. Let me tell you that.
And I think perhaps if you don't actually have your own channel, I guess I took for granted how you absolutely have to earn every single one of your subs. You do. And,
right.
It's not quite like Twitter, is it? Because, we've obviously got Green Pass Gaming as a Twitter handle as well. And you follow people, they follow you back. And, it's quite easy to get follows that way. But with YouTube, you have to earn every single one of them. And like you say, people stick around because they like what you're doing, because it's very easy to unsub someone, isn't it? It's just literally a click of a button.
Yes. Great point.
And the fact that you've built, month after month, year after, it's credit to yourself, because people could very easily unsubscribe and they don't want to. Your channel's going in one direction, and it's great to see, to be honest. I was keeping an eye on your subs, and I could see it creeping up. It was 4.98, 4.99.
I got to tell you, I have been very fortunate this year, in a year that most of us will look back 30 years from now when we're old men. And it's going to be one of those things that you tell a lot of the kids, that your grandkids or your great grandkids, that wow, 2020 was a year of horror. It for so many reasons. I mean, COVID, the death rate, the unemployment rate, the violence rate, the uneasiness with the government and law enforcement. It just has been. It has been a year that you would only see in the movies, like in a film, right? So I have been very, very fortunate to have had a voice very early on. And one of the things that I did is because, I get a lot of DMs. I get a lot of emails. I got a lot of messages from people thanking me for what I do. And I got to be honest with you. Like I get embarrassed because I don't necessarily feel like I'm doing anything but talking about games. And I can do this all day long. I love it. I mean, I can go for 4 hours on a podcast talking about games because it's something I love. And the fact that helps people in forms of fashions that, it's still shocking to me. So what I'm doing very early on in this pandemic was add additional shows to give people to try and alleviate some of the stresses of the world. And I think that when I did that, people looked to my channel in kind and started subbing. And I originally had set a goal with my marketing manager, because I call him my marketing manager because he's one of my best friends. I work with. Actually, his wife was my partner in the NYPD, and I was very good friends with him. And I'm like the quote unquote babysitter for their son when they were stuck at work. I took care of their son because I was retired. And it was awesome. I have a great relationship with the entire family. So he's my kind of like marketing manager. I kind of run things by him. He's a very, very witty fella. And we were talking early on, and I had made mention to him that, listen, I think people are going to need a positive voice. I think people are going to need a place where they can come and just kind of unplug from the world and just and listen. What do you think? And he's like, I think you should go for it. As much as you can do, I think you should do. And dude, I originally set a goal. Again, we all have goals, right? You want to hit 100 subs. You want to hit 1,000 views, right? That's what you want to do early on. I had set a goal to try. And I really meant, I'm not being facetious in any way, to try and hit 5,000 by the end of 2020. And I hit it 3 or 4 months before. That's a big deal.
You know what? This is a great time to be, a YouTube podcaster.
Yes.
With the launch of these consoles, it's so exciting. I remember the listening to your every show you did 5 shows, didn't you, on the build up to the.
In the last 3 weeks, I've done that twice, and I got to tell you, dude, it's exhausting.
I can imagine. You must be one of the hardest working people I know in the podcasting game, to be honest. But that build up to the July showcase really got me excited, and like you say, it does. It takes you out of the humdrum of the all the crap on the news, and it just builds that excitement which we're lacking elsewhere in our lives at the moment. So it's a great time to be a YouTuber. So where do you see yourself in a year's time? What's the next goal? Is it 10K? What does the next 12 months look like?
Yeah, I mean, depending on who you talk to, depending on who you listen to, there are several goals in the YouTube game. Right. Your first sub. My first sub is my wife. My wife.
That's good. That's good. I like that.
That's my first sub. She's my first Patreon member. She's my first channel member. She's been supportive, incredibly. So, you want to get your first sub, right? And my first sub came from my spouse, which it's such an encouraging thing. Then, of course, it was I have to get to 100 subs, and then it was the pinnacle of your YouTube career is hitting 1,000.
Yeah,
and 1,000 subs, 4,000 hours viewed, so you could be monetized. So people want to drop a super chat, they can do that. If you want to make a couple of bucks on the side, so you can get extra gas or extra groceries or something, it might be there. Depending on, and again, really, it depends on you how much I'll put it to this way. When you start a YouTube channel, its success is clearly on your shoulders, on how serious you take it. You got to remember, you have to the way I write these shows, and I'll come back to the question, I want to say this because I want to encourage others to try YouTube. If you want to talk about games and you have so much to say, don't keep it bottled up. Start a channel. Get out there. Throw some videos up there. You just never know. One of the most important aspects is when I write these shows, and I mean every one of these shows, I write it from a fan's perspective. Like I get goosebumps like I'm getting right now talking about it when I write these topics, because I'm interested on what I'm reading and writing. And if I'm interested, I am damn sure someone else is going to be just as interested. So if you are someone who wants to start a channel, go for it. But don't write it because you want to make money. Don't write it because you want to work for Sony and impress Microsoft, and hopefully someone will give you a call up to the big leagues. Write it from a fan's perspective. If you could figure out a way to be excited about what you're writing, like I am, people will be excited to sub your channel. I'll say that.
You know what? Yeah, that's that ethos has worked its way into my soul, to be honest. Because I co-host with Puxley, and he's my nephew, believe it or not, and
That's awesome. I love to hear
Yeah.
that.
We said early on, it's like, let's just do this. Let's see what happens. We are not doing it for the money whatsoever. If money happens further down the line, then brilliant. But we're not
It's
doing
just a
it for that.
bonus at that point.
It is a bonus because I knew that if I tried doing it for the money, I would probably get demoralized pretty quickly and give up. So I've made it about something else. And you're right, it is about because it might seem a little narcissistic, but like you said earlier, because we always have a little sort of before the podcast, and you do the same. I know you do. We have like a little green room sort of get together where we have a bit of a chat.
Yes.
And then I get so excited pressing that button, saying, right, we all ready? Right, press the button, we're off. And like you say, at that point, you've got all of that weight and pressure on your shoulders. And I like that. I enjoy that. And then at the end of the show, you hit the button again and it's all done. And then you sort of have a debrief afterwards. And I love that moment. But a bit like you said, every time I'm like, I'm not sure about this bit and I'm not sure about that bit. And like I say, it's not narcissistic, but it's kind of, I just want to get better and better and improve, every single time we do a show. But so in a year's time, where are you going to be in a year's time? Is it a subs thing?
I mean, subs are important. Let's not forget that at some point, and I want this to be completely clear. I want this to be understandable. There is going to come a point where this is going to go from a hobby to a business. And anyone that suggests that is not true is lying to you. And I will not do that. I will not lie to my public. I will not lie to myself. It becomes a small business. That is the reality. But more so than the whole, I want to sell shirts and I want to sell breakfast with boom mugs and all that other shenanigans that goes with hitting 10,000 subs is you're going to have people dependent on you, just like a TV show. Like your favorite show comes on Tuesday evenings at 8 p.m. And when the new series is running, the series for that fall or that spring, you and your loved one, or just you, are going to tune in at 8 p.m. on Tuesdays to watch said show. If you are inconsistent and you are not there for your fans, they will, and rightfully so, leave you. So for me, where I want to be next year is where I am now, just a little bit larger and more, because I don't look. I'm going to be honest with you, and I've put this out there. I don't think it's going to happen. I'm going to be honest. I just don't think it's going to happen. I have always dreamed of working for Microsoft, more specifically the Xbox division. I had an opportunity to have Major Nelson on the show. We're going to talk about that later and how that transpired. I'll tell some behind the scenes stuff behind that. And it was, look, when it happened, I thought for sure, hey, here's my foot in to Microsoft. It turns out that that's not probably going to happen, because the truth of the matter is I'm going to be 50 years old. Now, they're an inclusive company. We know that. But I'm a little long in the tooth. So, listen, I had my career, and I served the incredible people of the city of New York for 21 years. And I'm very fortunate to have retired at 44, which is unheard of in the States. No one can say that. People are working to their 70s here. And I'm not one of those people. So this is now my second career in a podcasting way. So I've come to the realization that I'm probably not going to get hired by Microsoft. And you know something? I'm perfectly okay doing this, because I have built an audience that likes what I have to say. They like the transparency. They appreciate the honesty. It was a bit of a risk telling people that I was a retired New York City police officer, simply because not a lot of people have, a lot of things nice to say about a police officer, and for good reasons for some point. But there are more good guys than bad. I'll definitely get on that bandwagon. But I am happy to say that if I am where I am next year, sitting in this chair talking to you, I am perfectly fine with that. I just hope that the sub count goes up, and I somehow, get my stride, and people want to listen more to the shows.
That's a great answer. And to be honest, yeah, I completely get where you're coming from with that as well. I think it's Microsoft's loss if they don't employ you, Boom.
I appreciate that. But again, to be fair, this game, if you will, no pun intended, is a very young man's game. And, look, I can sit here and talk about why I think Microsoft, why I should get hired by Microsoft. I think that they have people in positions that might be in the same position as me, a little long in the tooth, and maybe their ideologies are just a little old. And even though I'm older, I still have a lot of fresh ideas that I think could work. But again, at the end of the day, Microsoft is my favorite brand. I'm hoping that I can work with them again, and based on what I have been told and how the interaction between me and Larry were, I can see that happening again. My goal, get Phil on the show. Get Phil Spencer for 10 or 15 minutes to talk about the Series X or the Series whatever. And that would be the mecca, if you will, of my podcasting career.
That would be awesome. Oh my God. Yeah. Imagine that email coming in. So, okay. Well, while we're on the topic, let's do it. So how did the Major Nelson interview come about? Because that was straight after the July showcase, wasn't it?
Actually, it was literally during the showcase. Yeah. See, one thing that I will say, and again, folks, this is some inside baseball stuff. So get ready. When you were a podcaster, regardless of size, PR, especially for Microsoft, is very stingent on who they're going to allow their executives to be on their show. And for good reason. Obviously they have to investigate, they have to vet you, they have to make sure that you're not a racist, they have to make sure that you are not a foul-mouthed bugger. They have to make sure that you are someone that the community get behind, that you're positive. There's a lot of contributing factors, and I apparently hit all the check marks, so to speak. And actually, how this, believe it or not, happened was after E3 2019. I had reached out to Chris, the Xbox Fan Fest guy, which I didn't get a chance to meet there. And he works with Microsoft. He handles all of the big events for Microsoft, especially, of course, Xbox Fan Fest. And I reached out to him in a DM, and again, I figured, let me just take my shot. What's your own? Again, if you don't ask, it's always going to be a no. That's what my dad told me when I was a kid. So I reached out to him in a DM and I said, "Hey, Chris, I'm a big fan of everything you do with the community. How transparent you are, and how you always are constantly talking with the community. I run a podcast that's an Xbox, show, with, of course, at the time was the Welsh Gamer. I was taking a bit of a hiatus for, personal reasons, but we'll be coming back." And I said, I would love to be able to have you on the show for a little bit, just so we can talk about Xbox Fan Fest, where how do these loot boxes, the backpacks with all the goodies comes about? How do you decide on the logo? And he answered back and he said, "Hey, listen, I've heard of you. I've checked out your stuff." And he goes, "Look, I have to run this by Microsoft PR. I just can't say yes. This is what I need from you." And he needed all my social media information, all my email, my business email, need my real name, my phone number, my YouTube, all my YouTube stuff. And I sent it to him. I said, "Here you go. Here's everything. Anything else you need, just let me know." And in about a week later, he gets back to me and he says, "Listen, PR approved it. They like everything that you had, and they feel that you are a positive influence on the community, the Xbox community more specifically, and let's get this done." So we figured it out. He got back to me about a week later, and he said, "Listen, what questions do you?" I asked him, "What questions can I ask?" So he goes, "Listen, again, like the other PR stuff, you write the questions out, send them to me, and he'll see if they get approved." All 12 questions got approved, without doubt. They were all very properly written, and there were no risque kind of questions trying to pull anything out from him. And I had Chris on the show, and I don't even remember the date. I'm going to be honest with you. I'll reach out in the DM and I'll send you the link so you could throw it up there with this interview. And it was great. Me and the Welsh Gamer, we each asked him, I believe it was 6 questions apiece, and Chris was great. He didn't stay the whole show. He stayed about 45 minutes, give or take. Okay. And he had a great time, and actually that was the end of it. But this is where it starts to get good. In the end of the year, I want to say it's the end of November of 2019, I get a DM from Chris, and Chris says, "Hey, Boom, listen, do you have a business email?" I said, "Of course, Chris, here you go." I send it to him. I said, "Is there a particular reason?" And he goes, "Yes, Microsoft Public Relations wants to do something with your channel in the future." He said, "So look out for an email." So at this point, listen, I mean, come on.
I can imagine.
I don't even think I was at 3,000 subs at the time. I mean, I'm like, wait a second, wait. So of course, professional. Okay, Chris, this is great. Thank you so much. Whatever. And then I call my brother, and I'm like, dude, you're not gonna believe this. Microsoft, yes, Dad, Microsoft, Xbox wants to do something with my channel. So sure enough, in early early February, I want to say maybe it could have been the end of January, I get an email from Jeff from the Xbox team, Jeff Rubenstein, and you know him from Inside Xbox. And he reaches out to me and he says, "Hey, Craig, this is Jeff Rubenstein from the Xbox team. We heard so many really great things about how Chris had a great time on your show, and we are interested in doing something big with your channel." And then the following sentence, literally, like, I'm not even making this up, folks, literally knocked me off of the couch. "I'm wondering if you would be interested in having Larry Herb on your show, guest on your show." I fell out of my chair. I want you to know.
I can imagine.
Okay, because no, I don't want Larry on my show. If it's not Phil, I don't want anybody. Of course, I want Larry on my show. So of course, I immediately answered him, and he said, "Okay, great. We're gonna work on this." And he says, "Listen, in the next email, could you put a set of questions together that would that you'd want to ask Larry?" And I stayed up to 3:00 that morning, and I banged out a dozen questions. And he said, "Take your time with it. We don't need it right away." Literally the next day, he had all 12 questions. "Oh, Craig, thank you so much." The excitement was just on a scale of 100 from 1 to 10. And what obviously, with PR, with any big moving companies, things like this, they take time. They take time. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that we're unaware of as just regular folks. And that was, I was, going back and forth with Jeff in February. And then obviously in July, the July 23rd show for Xbox, it turns out that they wanted to incorporate my channel in the celebration of everything Xbox for that big showcase. Now, Major Nelson did an interview with Colt Eastwood, which was fantastic. And he also wound up showing up on Dealer, on RDX, on the post show. And then right from that post show, he did my show. And one of the things that I wasn't aware of is, like right now we're on camera. One of the things with Microsoft, at least I was under the impression, is that they would do the icons. And talking with Larry behind the scenes before we went live, he had actually said, would you like to be on camera? And I'm like, sure. And that's how that actually happened. And the rest is pretty much history. And I got to tell you, man, Larry was great to talk to.
Yeah, I can imagine.
He was answered every question. He was very passionate. He was very excitable about the Xbox brand. He actually said that he actually asked me a question live on the air. And that's funny because I made a joke afterwards. He says, Craig, I just want to ask you a question. I figured he was going to ask me, like, what's my favorite Xbox game? He asked me live on the air, and I have it on tape. I've heard him about 100 times. Can I come back on your show? And if I wasn't live on the air, I would have fell out of my chair. Like, oh my, are you kidding me? Do I want you to come back on the show? Man, you can come to my house if you want to. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And he talked about coming back to New York, and when he does, he wants to, get together and have a slice of pizza. I mean,
I've got the pizza written down. Yep, I saw that.
Come on, this is Wonderland stuff happening. And again, I mean that wholeheartedly. Like, working with Microsoft, this for me was I think for any podcaster, it's a dream come true. But for me personally, dude, it was the combination of all of the hard work. And again, I'm not a shill, and I don't think I have to say that, because most people that are going to listen to this, like, yeah, Boom is legit. He's like, he clear as glass. But my favorite brand is Xbox. Take nothing away from Sony, take nothing away from Nintendo. I support those consoles, but my bread and butter, my favorite thing to do is pick up my Elite controller, go to my friends list, see who's on, see who's winning in achievements, go to my, and play games for, that's my favorite thing to do. Xbox is my favorite place to play. So as a podcaster, as someone that is going to put this out for people to listen to, I mean, I walked away from the interview. I was all red in the face. I was flustered from excitement. And again, I got done with the video, and I was like, man, I hope I didn't blow it. It turns out that he had a really good time. He really enjoyed himself. He felt comfortable. He felt, that I knew what I was talking about. It was something really special.
It's an awesome interview, and we'll have to put a link in the description down below, Boom. But yeah, I'm very envious. That was an awesome moment, and you must get him back on. You must badger him and pester him and promise him that slice of pizza, whatever it takes. Get him back on that show.
Yeah. And you know what? Again, that is what separates Microsoft as a monster company, as the second largest, richest company in the world, because obviously they're slightly behind Apple. But just think about that for a second. As big as Microsoft is, and as big as Xbox is, because people go poo-poo it all you want. Oh, they only sold 50 million consoles. They're still one of the biggest companies / brands. Xbox is still a major brand. And to think that you got to remember, I don't have 100,000 subs. You know what I'm saying? I don't have notoriety. I have a community that follows me, that supports me, and is unbelievably generous. But I am a tadpole in a massive pond that could potentially have the Loch Ness Monster in there. You know what I'm saying? So to have them reach out to me is mind-boggling. Like, it is unbelievable. Like, it doesn't even make any sense that they would take the time to be on my small show, and that is the difference. That is what separates them from Nintendo, from Sony, because those people could say, well, they're very corporate. Microsoft, straight down the letter, corporate, but that's not in fact the case. Sony, very straight. Nintendo, very straight down the line. You know what I'm saying? Microsoft, very loosey-goosey. You know what I'm saying? Very friendly, very open.
They've got that human touch. And like you say,
dude, that's a great point.
To reach out to you like that, it does show their human side. And to be honest, Phil trying to be consumer friendly this whole generation with all the backwards compatibility and stuff, it's just it's just an extension of them reaching out and giving the human touch like they do.
Yeah, it's astounding. As big as the company is, there is a human side to them.
It's an awesome interview. We'll put it in the description below. We're just over an hour. I think we're probably done with the questions that I've got. Boom. You have been every part the guest. I knew you would be, to be honest. It's been an absolute delight.
Hey, listen, I got some extra time if you want to keep going, dude. By all means, go crazy.
I've got other appointments, I'm afraid. You know what? I'll tell you what. Let's put a rain check on that. Let's fill in the gaps at some other point. The bits that we missed.
Absolutely.
Because I'd love to do that. I'd love to have you back on. And there's a ton of other questions I'd love to ask you. Yeah, it's been an absolute blast. It's been an absolute pleasure. Boom. Like I say, you've been every part of the guest I knew you would be. Now,
Thank you.
As I said at the top of the show, I can't believe there's a single person watching this that isn't aware of your work. But just in case, where can we find you?
Well, I mean, listen, the easiest way to get in touch with me, and again, my DMs are open to everyone. If you have a question, something I said you didn't like or you did like, and you want me to elaborate on it, if you want advice, if you're thinking about just starting your YouTube channel, and I've had over a dozen people say, "Boom, I'm kind of curious. Your mic, how do you do the teleprompter? What software do you use?" I am open to having full-on conversations with anyone. In fact, I'll even do it like this. Like if it's too much to text, I'll do a one-on-one. And you know why I do that? Real quick, I do that because of Graphic God. Graphic God is obviously, you know who he is. That's, he runs, of course, the Retro Renegades, and he, of course, is a full-time artist, and he's done all my work for my channel. And Graphic God Productions is like legit. Like, he does all of my work. And the one thing that I loved about the way he handles his business is that it's not very just how much he's going to charge you. Here's my bank account number, and here's your thing. He would sit with you just like I'm sitting with you right now and discuss privately. It's a private video. You guys are talking. Oh, Jay, I didn't like this. I did like this. And that's why seeing how he did it is how I said, you know what? If someone has a question or they need help, I'm not going to turn anyone away. So if you're somebody that's interested in starting a podcast and you're just not sure what to do, and you want someone that is going to take the time to give you advice, easiest way to get in touch with me is through DM. Follow me on Twitter at Mr. Boomstick XL. I answer all DMs, and I get a lot of them per day, and I make sure that I answer everybody. And you can also email me. That's actually how VJ, who you had on your show last week, reached out to me. He reached out to me in a business email, and look where it got him. He is now part of the Xbox Factor podcast on a weekly basis.
I was really pleased to hear that. Actually,
he's a good dude, very
asset.
smart, very smart dude. It's an honor to work with him. And so again, reach out to me on email, reach out to me on my DM. And if you're interested and you want a lot of live content that is fun and interesting and thought-provoking and well-researched, Double Barrel Gaming is going to give you all the hottest, newest gaming information you could possibly want.
Well, I can personally vouch for that, because that's exactly what I did. I reached out to you, dude, what software are you using? I can't find anything on the net. What are you using? And to be fair, you responded within the hour with everything. You told me about the Graphic God.
Yes.
Absolutely brilliant. Really grateful. And like I say, if it wasn't for you, and I know, this might sound like I'm blowing smoke your way, and I'm not really. It's just I'm so grateful, because if it wasn't for your show and your kindness and generosity, we would not be sitting here doing this right now. So,
well, I definitely appreciate the compliment, and I just want to finish that with I think that we content creators, big and small, need to lift one another up. It's one of the biggest shticks with my shows is not showcasing me. If you're tuning into Double Barrel Gaming, you already know who I am, right? If you've subbed the channel, you know what you're getting. It's putting everyone else, raising everyone else that takes the time to be on is super important, and that's what I think. I think we don't see enough of it. I'm going to be honest with you. We don't see enough bigger content creators helping smaller ones. I think everyone was worried about, I'm going to lose to them. Listen, be a good guy. Trust me, it pays off in the end.
Absolutely, and I'm looking forward to one day not being the smallest fish in the pond. But
yes, absolutely.
We'll see. Boom, it's been an absolute pleasure. We'll have to do this again very soon. Like I said, there's probably lots of gaps of stuff that I didn't ask, but thank you very much for your time, and we'll do it again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.